Hello and welcome to Connecting Hope, presented by the Hamilton County Council on Alcohol and Other Drugs. I'm Will Hampton, along with Monica Greer from the Hamilton County Council on Other Drugs.
Yes.
Show 31 for us this week, and we just keep clicking away. Jim Ginder's coming up in the show, and man, he's just a man of wealth of knowledge, and
amazing man.
he works so hard, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So passionate about what he does. You can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, he goes a mile a minute and does everything spectacular.
So Jim Ginder coming up in segment 2 tonight. But first, let's talk about a big program that I know you're very fond of, is the Drug Take Back program. And there's an event coming up April 24th.
Yes.
Tell me about the Drug Take Back and how people can get involved.
Sure. We host 2 a year. We do it along with the DEA's format. So October and April every
Okay.
year. So April 24th at Riverview Hospital East in Noblesville, we'll have a take back program from 9 to noon.
Yeah. And the people just pull up.
Yeah.
And the officer's there, the sheriff's there to take the...
Very simple. They don't have to get out of their car. It doesn't have to be in the particular bottles. You can black out your name if you want to bring it in the bottles. But yeah, just get it out of your house. If you're not using it or if it's expired, get it out of the house.
And we've learned in this show, talking to a couple of the success stories, that people say that, it's very important to get that out of the house, because when people visit, friends come over, you don't know what they're doing when they
Right.
go. They might
Or
be getting
open
in your-
houses.
Yeah.
People do that during an open house. They'll go raid the cabinets. So yeah.
Yeah. So April 24th at Riverview Health, right there in front of the hospital.
Yep.
Drug Take Back.
Yes.
Time for our success story. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
Let's go. Part 1 of tonight's success story.
I spent 17 years in addiction. And I remember I grew up long before I matured. I started really falling on hard times in the 2000s. And in 2015, found myself sleeping behind a gas station. And I would line up 5 milk crates in a row and wrap up in this blanket that somebody just threw me out of their car window at the gas station. And I did that for about a year. I slept on those milk crates, and I remember sleeping back there feeling like I had life all figured out. And that was not the case, right? And I remember trying to play the victim, right? There was a wing restaurant over near 79th Michigan, which is where I stayed at the gas station behind. And I remember him allowing me to come in before they opened to clean up the building for a few bucks. And of course, as soon as I got that little money, it was gone. I just remember being behind that gas station. I was at the end of my ropes. I had just completely given up on life. And I was merely just existing.
Thank you again so much for sharing your story. That's just part 1. Part 2 coming up a little bit later. And people can reach out to you. What's your email again? If there's people watching this that say, I've got a success story that I'd like to tell, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. Monica Greer, MONICA .GREER at hamiltoncounty.in.gov.
Yep, and then maybe your success story, their success story will be right here.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. Connecting Hope continues after this. Welcome back to Connecting Hope. Will Hampton with Monica Greer, and a guy you've seen from time to time on this show doing his Narcan tutorial, Mr. Jim Ginder. Jim Ginder from the Hamilton County Health Department. Best way to describe you, right? Just enter here, every man who does everything. Jim, welcome. Glad to have you finally on Connecting Hope. Only took us 30 shows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay.
Your world, like all of our world this last year, has been COVID. So much going on. The vaccinations that are, people are, a lot of people are vaccinated by the time you're watching this. And the governor came out with specifics about the mask mandate. So much, we record this show, so things may change from the time we're talking now to when this actually airs. But as a guy who's been so knee deep, maybe not even knee deep, neck deep in COVID and vaccination, what's your first take on the possibility of people not wearing masks.
So I think that's a great question, and we're just waiting to see the official word from the governor's office to see what the governor is going to put in his executive order. My philosophy is that we know that masks do a great job of protecting individuals from COVID and preventing COVID to be transmitted to other people. And with our vaccines, I think that when we get 70% of that population per our State Department of Health vaccinated, then maybe we can lay off the mask for a little bit. But I'm just concerned that if, especially with spring break coming up, that if we lay off the mask too early, then we may get back to square zero all over again and have to start those lockdowns again with the increased cases. Because I know there's a lot of individuals who are traveling to Florida.
Yeah.
I can tell you because I've been, I'm at the COVID vaccine clinic every day except Wednesday. And a lot of times we'll hear people say, well, I can't schedule my second appointment because I'm going out of town to Florida for vacation. And that's a big concern that we have, that everybody is traveling for spring break and they're going to let their guard down a little bit. And maybe we'll see spikes, maybe we won't. We just won't know until the 14 days after they get back from spring break or traveling.
So what happens with that? I've wondered if somebody gets the first shot and then they can't make it back in that time frame, is there?
That's a great question. So with the 3 vaccines that have been approved or have gone through their emergency authorization, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson, each vaccine has a certain amount of time. So Pfizer, it's 21 days. Moderna, it's 28 days. But technically, you can actually go up to 42 days. Okay. That's kind of the maximum time you have. So you kind of have a little leadway with getting your second dose. And something, I'm glad you brought that up, Monica. So with the Pfizer and the Moderna, you're not fully vaccinated until you've had those 2 vaccines and you're 14 days past your second one. Yeah. And with the Johnson & Johnson, since that's 1 dose, that's 14 days after that 1 dose, then you're said to be fully vaccinated.
That's good information to know.
It is.
But just remember though, even though you've had that vaccine, we still need to think about social distancing. If we can go outside, be outside. If you're with people that are not vaccinated, maybe hang out outside, or if they're in your house, keep the windows open and the fans running to keep that air circulating through the house as well too.
And again, vaccination does not mean you can't get
Correct.
COVID. You might be able to get it. It just won't necessarily be as severe.
Correct. So so typically individuals that have tested positive for COVID feel kind of bad for 10 days. We know that individuals who have completed both vaccines with the Pfizer, Moderna, or the Johnson & Johnson, instead of feeling bad for 10 days, maybe they just feel kind of blah for maybe 3 or 4 days, then they're perfectly fine. So it's just another way of protection. I just tell people like masks, social distance, that's just our vaccines are like another tool in our toolbox to prevent COVID.
Well, again, thank you for all that you do. You've saved lives. Yeah. And thank you for doing that. How would you like to talk about something other than COVID?
That would be awesome.
Monica, I know you have places you want to go with Jim right here.
So you and I both sit on the Overdose Fatality Review Board.
Yes.
We've been meeting for over a year now. So we review cases of overdoses and try and figure out a way that maybe it could have been prevented. So that's what we've been doing up to this point. Tell us about the psychological autopsies.
Sure. One of the programs that we do for individuals who take their life via suicide or through overdose is a psychological autopsy. And what it is after a loved one has either, as I mentioned, taken their life via suicide or overdose, I give the families about 3 months or so. Then I contact the families to see if they want to spend an hour and a half with me just talking about their loved ones. And when I meet with the individuals, my goal is to try and figure out why this person took their life or why they overdosed. Like a great example is maybe they had had a previous overdose or previous suicide and they didn't get the help that they needed, or somebody didn't, or there were some red flags that person had in their history that maybe nobody caught that they should have been caught as well too. And I think I've done probably about 100 of them, and I think it kind of gives the family closure after the death of a loved one, because the families understand that they're helping other people, they're helping others to hopefully prevent their loved ones from taking their life via suicide or overdose as well too.
Yeah, and that's so important. during our meetings, we have a lot of criminal history, we have the coroner's report, but to get this personal piece from the family is so
I call it the
important.
social piece of this, the suicide or the overdose.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is a lot of things that our coroner's office or law enforcement, they go a different path than I go. And they're more of, I say they talk, they're there for the dead, I'm there for the living, so they can tell me about their loved one as well too. So
And there are resources out there.
there are tons of
where people can,
resources.
if they maybe see an indicator.
There's tons of resources as well too. And what's interesting is after I collect all this data, then we look through the data and try and figure out, is there something that we're seeing common in the community that people are doing? Is there things that maybe we can put in place to prevent it? Or maybe we can't, a great example, maybe we need to give more Narcan out in the community as well too. So it's a great data piece as well to help us on this team to figure out what can we do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a huge piece. And, you know, anything that we can do to build our group to be able to prevent.
Very much so.
That's our goal. So you mentioned Narcan. Why don't you talk a little bit about the distribution and...
Sure. So about 5 years ago, the Indiana Department of Health had a grant out for Narcan because we started to see increases of opiates in 2015. So we actually applied for the grant and received the money for the grant. And what it is a program, it's a joint program from the Indiana State Department of Health and our local health departments that we train people to administer Narcan. Then also we teach them about what to look for if their family member is in the process of using any type of narcotics or any type of opiate, then also how to save them in an emergency situation, then also what are some resources that they can get their family members that help if they need that help as well too. Then we paired up with your organization to do the Narcan boxes and to do all the education for the community members as well too.
For people watching, if they've never, they've seen you on this show, hopefully. But how does the Narcan work?
It's a great drug. It's really easy to think about. So think about an opiate. It's an opiate molecule. And think about your brain. And your brain has molecules in it, or receptors, and they're opiate receptors. So what happens is when these opiates get into the brain, they fit in the opiate receptors. And we know opiates are depressants, so they slow everything down. So it slows down the respiratory system first, then the brain, then the heart. Then what happens is when we give somebody Narcan or naloxone, those molecules are really, really big. So what happens is when Narcan comes along, it pushes the opiates off the receptors and the Narcan sets on the receptors. And our goal is for that person, hopefully, to start breathing until our local fire department or our local law enforcement can get there to give more care as well too. The bad thing about Narcan though, it's only good for about 30 to 90 minutes. So it's really important that we get 911 there so law enforcement can give additional doses and also EMS can as well too.
So if somebody has Narcan in the home, obviously they want to call 911 first.
Very much so.
And then
give the
administer.
Narcan.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. Because we know with a lot of our heroin is mixed with some other things like fentanyl or it's cut with other things. We know that typically one dose of Narcan doesn't work for heroin that's mixed with other things like fentanyl.
Yeah.
And there are other drugs that are starting to make their...
There are, like we just had an overdose in part of the county of a cocaine overdose yesterday as well too. We also had somebody overdose on methamphetamines on Tuesday as well too.
Wow.
And the reason why I know that is because I oversee the OD mapping program here in the county. And I was very fortunate with Monica and some other colleagues to go to New York to get trained on a project. And we actually brought OD mapping back with us. And what it is, it's a pretty cool program that we can map all the overdoses that occurred. If Narcan was given, what possible drug it was it a fatality, what time it was, then the system will let us print out all this data to show, hey, you are seeing lots of overdoses at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and this is where 15 of them occurred. So we can pair up with law enforcement to say, hey, maybe you guys need to think about doing something in this area as well too. And it also helps us look at drug trends as well too.
So again, back to prevention. If you can look at that map and say, hey, you guys have a problem here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jim, it's been so great having you on the
Well,
show.
thank you very
Good
much.
to see you.
Thank you,
and
thank you.
we will have you back, I'm sure.
Awesome.
Do you get a
Sounds
vacation
good.
anytime soon?
No,
No. So who do we call to say, give Jim a vacation?
it won't happen.
Well, thank you again
You're
for all you
quite
do.
welcome.
All
Thanks for having me.
It's Jim Ginder from the Hamilton County Health Department. Thank you.
Of course.
We're going to take a break, back with more Connecting Hope after this. Welcome back to Connecting Hope, presented by the Hamilton County Council on Alcohol and Other Drugs. Will Hampton, along with Monica Greer. I've always kind of wondered, how did the name Hamilton County Council on Alcohol, that's a long name. Can't you
It's
just
a
call it
long
something else?
name. It was before me.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
But
too
basically,
long.
I think what people, if they're just watching this show maybe the first time, basically it's a body of great organizations that work together to help solve this problem, right?
Yes. We have a 9-member board that oversees everything, and then we've got probably 80 members of the coalition, and we do drug and alcohol prevention, treatment, and law enforcement programming.
Yeah. And every time we mention it, we got to say thanks to George Christo for
Yes.
the
Thank
desk.
you, George
Yeah.
Christo.
He's a good man, isn't he?
He is so sweet.
Your predecessor.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you for filling in so well for George, because
Thank you.
he did such a great job for such a long time.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, we're back with part 2 of our success story. Here it is, part 2, tonight's success story.
I remember going to some psych wards down in Eskenazi, and I met this one person in particular who thought it'd be great for me to come and stay with them for a few days. And during the course of those few days, I tried something that I swore I would never try. And later that night, it was the first snow of 2015, and this person actually walked with me 28 blocks to get me into treatment, and that was at Harbor Lights. And I will never forget feeling so grateful, because they were going to just put me back out. And the temperature dropped a couple more degrees, and they said, "You're lucky, we can't let you leave. We don't have a bed right now because our detox manager is not here. But if you want, you can sleep in the janitor's closet." And I just remember feeling so grateful. After my 3rd time of being in jail, I realized that I had to do something different. And I went to court probably about 24 days after being there, and they released me on a controlled release on house arrest. And I just remember begging my family for me to come stay there for a couple times. And I remember going to Progress House for some meetings when I was in the Salvation Army. And I was like, I'm gonna go to Progress House. And I made that my sole goal, and it's the first time that I ever accomplished something. An amazing friend of mine, he was like, I'm gonna make it happen. And about 5 days later, I found myself in Progress House. And then the miracle just takes off from there. And I went through Progress House in January of 2018. They asked me if I would like to be hired on as an employee. And I always wanted that from day one. I wanted to be able to help people. My aunt has done our family ancestry for years. And I come from a long lineage of people who have served their purpose. And I always wondered what my purpose was going to be in life. And the moment that I quit thinking about that and I started to just help people because people were helping me is when I found out what my purpose was going to be. And I've been sober for coming up on 3.5 years. I've been sober since 2017. And May 6, 2017. And looking back then, going, because of the relationships that I was able to build, I've always been great at talking to people. I've always been really great at talking. I could do it forever. And because of Progress House showing me how to build relationships and healthy relationships and maintain those, here I sit today. I work full-time at a treatment facility. I'm also a real estate agent with FC Tucker in Carmel, Indiana. I went from homeless 5 years ago to being a homeowner to being able to sell homes and help people get into homes. And I've always, when I started helping people, I found out that that's my purpose. That's what I was intended to do, was to help people, whether it be as a Mason, right? I applied to become a Mason, I got denied. And I started using my communication skills, seeking other people who are involved in this organization, and I found someone who got me in. And so now I can help other people that are Masons. And as a Shriner, we can help kids who don't have insurance and need some type of surgeries and things like that.
Part 2 of tonight's success story is always great to hear. And one thing I think I've learned is there are so many great recovery centers. A lot of our success stories come from different places, and there's so many, they're doing the same thing but differently, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the key components is a lot of people that work in the centers are in recovery themselves.
Yeah.
So that really helps. The people feel comfortable and able to succeed.
Yep. Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for sharing. We're back to close this edition of Connecting Hope after this. And welcome back to Connecting Hope, presented by the Hamilton County Council on Alcohol and Other Drugs. And we just heard from Jim Gender earlier in this show, and quite simply, he's a rock star, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
He does it all.
Yeah, he works really hard, and there's so much still going on. And I think more than anything, what we're seeing is that Hamilton County is in pretty good shape with the Hamilton County Health Department. They have really rolled up their sleeves this last year. Pardon the pun with the vaccine going on, but they really have,
Yeah.
and not just Jim, but the entire group.
Yeah, I mean, they had to just drop everything and take over this, and they did a seamless job with it and are still doing a great job.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the great unknown is where we are right now.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. We'll have another show, Connecting Hope, next week. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, Will.
All right, that'll finish this edition. We thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.